Cinderborne, a Star Wars story by EldritchEmber. Prologue. We are the survivors of the Star Destroyer Tessalon, marooned on a world without name. TN 14121110, or Tin, as his friends called him, sat back, his fingers hovering over the impromptu transmitter keys, quivering like blades of grass in a hurricane. The transmitter itself was a heavy, cumbersome thing, something like a large brick of hardened midnight. It was about 2 paces across and a forearm lengths tall. Along its edge and over its surface glowed vines of green. Its leftward side preferred a slowly spinning dish skyward, and on its face glowed the screen over which Tin hunched. All told, it was an ugly thing, but it functioned, and that was all that mattered. Whatever he called, he sent out mattered little. The chances of any cry, however loud, being heard of so far from the faintest spark of civilization were beyond minute. Still, he had to try. You're few in number and without means of escape. Send aid. Again, he paused, engulfed in an overwhelming tide of memories, so cold, terrible, and heavy, they threatened to bury him alive, snuff out from wherever more the dimming ember of his shattered heart. He started again, pale, black eyes fixed on the lambent screen, its sickly green letters staring back, challenging him, taunting him, terrifying him. Tin fell back, arms slack at his sides, faint steps crunched from behind. Then a heavy hand rested on his shoulder, banishing the phantoms he could not ignore, anchoring him to be here and now. Hey, Tin. How comes it? The voice belonged to Onyx, a stout fellow with a low baritone voice that soothed his comrades as easily as it terrified his foes. As well as you'd expect, Onyx, he smiled sadly. I can compose messages. Those signals are just fine. But I can't transmit anything. Well, Onyx sighed, breathed rasping mechanically through his helm. That's not ideal. Are you sure about that? Tin lifted off his helm, its black void-like eyes staring emptily heavenward. Beneath his equally dark hair was plastered to his scalp, gleaming wetly with perspiration. I think a transmitter that doesn't transmit is living the dream. His voice took on a sardonic tone, matching his shallow smile on his lips. Onyx smiled heavily, eliciting a dry laugh from his comrade. Alright, well, whatever you're doing, whenever you're done amusing yourself, we're at the wreck, seeing what we can scavenge. Come help if you can. Tim nodded, then rose to his feet, sweeping up his helmet in a trailing hand. Well, might as well leave this for later. There's nothing more I can do without power. The pair made their way downhill, bone-white armor set affixed in the midday light. Their gait was the slow, heavy pace of men who knew neither journey nor destination had meaning. Ahead, their fallen Star Destroyer loomed, rising from the grassy plains like a slate-gray blade, its immense form shrouded in a veil of acrid smoke. Its once sleek hull was pitted and rough, pockmarked in a thousand places by shards of Starkiller base, as it was torn apart from within, unable to restrain the demon in its belly any longer. It had slashed the midnight sky like a blade of molten steel, grinding across placid meadows and leaving in its wake a vast, dark scar. There it lay, smoldering and lifeless, a behemoth seething in the night. When morning came, bathing the bleak hull in its honeyed light, only a few figures stirred. 10 crept stooped and haggard into the cheerful day, their armor cracked and eyes downcast, the feet heavy on their shoulders. Now as Tin and Onyx descended, they saw the true horror of that wretched night, when cries were unanswered, and blood ran like rain. Thousands of bodies lay in orderly rows, glistening like ivory carvings set side by side. A giant's playthings displayed with care. Among them strode the living, cradling their slain brothers in shaking arms. Ten inhaled sharply, a cold blade spearing his heart as he looked over those fields of motionless white. A snowstorm come in spring, a pale mantle through which thin patches of green peeked. How? His voice was hoarse, chafed, and scarred with sorrow. How did we survive that? Onyx shrugged. Behind the tapered oblongs of his visor, his eyes burned with pain. It touched his voice with razor claws, turning it ragged at the edges. A curse of the worst sort. Tim nodded. He understood exactly what Onyx meant. So many had fallen. So many brilliant lives had burned themselves out. And now he was left to dig the graves, tend to the ashes, carry their extended dreams within his own heart. Tin? Onyx asked. And only now did the broken trooper realize that he had frozen, standing still as a statue carved from the very image of grief, a figure in mid-step, helm tucked under one arm, eyes wide and staring, lips parted slightly, and breath hissing quickly between. This is all Tin's fault. Tin's voice is hoarse, fragile even. The sound of steel, bent to the brink of breaking. The hush of surrender, the keen edge of terrible pain. Onyx rested his heavy hand on his comrade's shoulder, but whatever he had meant to say died on his lips when he saw the stricken look on Tin's face. It was times like these when words could not bind the wounds, only deepen them. Did he think none of us hated death as he did? Did he think we were never afraid? Onyx shifted uncomfortably. FN 2187 is dead. Murdered by the Resistance hero Finn. Tim's eyes were cold and dark, glimmering with terrible pain. Shocked by the sharpness of his own words, he fell silent, and when at last he spoke again, it was with a fierce pace, perfect tune with the beating of his fury-seared heart. He turned his back on us, Onyx. He claimed weariness of death, of drenching his hands in innocent blood, so instead, he bathed them in ours. I know, Onyx said uncertainly, but he pressed on anyway. He took something from us all when he left. I still wonder how he could turn his back so easily, if he ever truly was one of us. Oh, he was, when it served him. But once he got a taste of battle, once he saw what it meant to be a soldier of the Order, he decided the bloodshed sickened him, until at last, the light set him afire and filled his heart with hate. We don't have to go down there just yet. We can wait a bit if it's too hard to look at. Tin sighing. Waiting won't bring them back. Neither will suffering. Another sigh. I'm alright. Time is something of which we have precious little. I'd better not waste it. With that he descended the hill, smoothly plopping his helmet back over his head as he went, obscuring the pain in his eyes, the tightness of his jaw. What his armor could not hide, however, was the fist he kept clenched and trembling at his left side, a symbol of the rage burning in his veins, like a river of molten steel. That was the kind of fire which wise men feared, for it was one nothing in all the world could extinguish, not even the vengeance for which it yearned. Onyx gritted his teeth. then descended after his comrade, knowing there was nothing more he could do, yet feeling no better for it. They have trudged down, replacing clean air, the stench of death, and recently extinguished flame. Here, each breath was thick with smog, the fumes lending a palpable weight to the shrouded skies. It seemed as if they strode beneath a filth-clotted stream as they approached, helmets filtering the worst of it, but leaving still a haunting odor. There was, after all, nothing in all the world that can fully purge the scent of death, nor lessen the sorrow its grip brings. Ahead, a few troopers drifted like dour phantoms, placing among the fallen, their movements leaving whirls and eddies in the thick mire, their datapads glowing like plates of muted starlight. Identifying the dead was a task for one which only the mad yearned, for each slack face tore away a part of already scarred hearts and left wounds that would never fully heal. Each time they stooped, each time they rose there with a coldness, a loss clinging fast to their armored frames. They became like spirits themselves, wraiths chained down by regret. Even their steps seemed distant, quiet, faint as whispers in a hurricane. Tin knelt beside one of the fallen, smoke billowing around him like a wind-swept cowl, clinging to his body in fraying strands. Now, not even his armor could hide his trembling. When he stood again, his eyes blazed behind their black tombs, and whatever sadness there had been before was burned away in that terrible heat. "Let's be gone from this place," he whispered, voice tight with rage. "There's nothing that can be done here." "Not until the smoke clears anyway," Onyx agreed. "Except, of course, identifying the dead." Tin's eyes shone like obsidian wedges within their bleached white helm as he fixed a basilisk stare upon his friend. Then he wept a single, molten iron tear hidden beneath his helm, but obvious all the same. "You're right. Onyx, we cannot bring them back. Not with hate, not with sorrow. But there's one thing we can do, and more often than not, it is the only." His fist tightened, thin rivulets of crimson slowly coiling around his fingers, dripping thick and dark to the earth. Remember them. This was the prologue of Cinderborne, a Star Wars story by EldritchEmber.